Welcome to the RICO 12 Speaker Meeting Podcast. My name is Justin, and I'm an addict, and thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Once again, welcome to the RICO 12 Speaker Meeting. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust and sex, food and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom meeting each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. In order to ask questions if you're here live, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you are hearing this podcast recorded and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, or if you'd like to be a guest speaker in a future meeting, please go to rico12.com to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations and to submit to become a guest speaker. RICO 12 is an ad-free service, and we appreciate your help in keeping it that way. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the costs of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to www.rico12.com/support, and that's RECO12.com, or you can click in the link to PayPal in the chat of the live meeting. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 25. Now, last week's meeting was with Harvey E., who spoke to us on different types of relapses and relapse in general. I think it was a really powerful presentation on recognizing the restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness that can lead to relapse. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Robert D. Now, Robert's been sober since 2015. He's a Dutch citizen, 52 years of age, a master in tax law, former senior executive at a Fortune 500 group, father of 3 children with whom contact has been lost for years. He ended up homeless, institutionalized, and practically speaking, broke from his rebellion against God. A man who fought what the program asks, who was eventually beaten into a state of reasonableness, finding himself relieved of a mental disorder and in a cure for alcoholism through the practices of AA's clear-cut set of directions. Robert, I'm excited to hear from you, and so are we all here. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for having me. My name is Robert, and I am an alcoholic. I don't want to spend too much time on qualifying myself, but what I would like to say is this. Thinking of speaking tonight, what came to my mind is an incident where I used to sneak down on Saturday morning with my brother to go to the fridge and to steal some liquid that has lots of sugar. And I would manipulate him to come with me because I didn't want to get caught alone. And then I would force him to take less than I do and blame him for taking too much. Never it was enough. And I was already looking forward to the next Saturday as we crawled upstairs. And so it has been with any substance or any activity that can relieve me of stress and tension in my stomach of being restless, irritable, and discontented. Now, when I started drinking for the first time, I was very nauseous and spinning. And rather than thinking not to do it again, I figured out that if you leave the light on in the corridor and you look under the door, the spinning stops. And that gave me the permission to try it again. And the second time was a full-blown blackout. So there is no doubt in my mind that I'm allergic to alcohol. It has an abnormal reaction on my body, and it makes me think in weird ways. Rather than stopping it, I'm thinking how to keep this solution so that I can feel at ease. And in the period between I was 15 until 47 years, the quantities and the frequency of consuming alcohol increased. The insanity that came with it increased. Like the big book says, I went to sordid places to look for someone besides liquor. I worked a lot, not to feel. I traveled the world. And one part of me thought that I had arrived because I had a very senior executive position, making a fortune. What people earn in a year, I earned in a month, that kind of ratio. But I was never at ease. And it became increasingly clear that I was in the grips of addiction. And finally, I surrendered in the sense that I didn't go on a next business trip in the January 2015. I stayed home and I came to California with the idea to get sober in some retreat. Now, taking the taxi to go to that retreat, I met Alcoholics Anonymous. I met a man who carries the message. And although I was not supposed to drink 2 weeks prior to the retreat, I was drunk and hangover and full of fear and shame and guilt. And this guy asked me, "How are you?" After telling me that he's a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and he has been sober for 27 years. And in that instant, I knew I never have to drink again. And that is where I was connected to God. That's what I believe today. The obsession to drink was removed, or like the big book says, Bill says, I was separated from alcohol. I have tested this. I have tried to go to drink again in a moment of desperation, and my body stopped working and I could physically not enter the bar. And this was after looking at the train tracks, which appealed like a good way to go that evening. So I know I've been separated from alcohol, and I know that I have been connected to a power greater than myself, which I call God. And I don't know what God is, and I have actually no intention to define it. I think this is a pretty useless activity. But to call it my higher power, I have reluctance to. Because I don't think there is anything of mine in this story of getting connected. I cannot own it, I cannot claim it, I cannot be proud of it. Because the last thing I wanted to do on that morning in that car was to never drink again. That was the last thing I wanted to do. So this connection came, and today I can say that I'm grateful for it. Now, how did I then enter the program of Alcoholics Anonymous? So I went to this retreat. We went to meetings every night. There were a lot of recovered alcoholics around me, but I never opened the book. It wasn't actually presented to me. So I went back to Switzerland, started going to meetings. I walked for miles and miles and miles. I drank gallons of coffee. I did a fifth step sex inventory in an Italian pizzeria next to two 18-year-old girls. I did my first third step prayer on the sidewalk at 11 p.m., not knowing what the hell I'm doing. So I was unguided in AA. And looking back on it, I abused the people that don't carry the message. I chose the easier, softer way because something within me knew it wasn't right, but it was nice and easy. Then about 2 years later, I was again back in the US. I reached out for help. Help came, and a man took me through the book in about 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And I had no idea what surrender means, what it means to honor that connection that was given to me, to devote my life to that power that struck me sober. So, for example, I did a third step, I think. Yeah, I did the third step, and the guy told me go home. And of course, I didn't go home. I went to have dinner with some girls, and they looked at me and they said, "You're all spaced out." And I said, "I met God today," and that's where the conversation ended. So I was rebellious. And I was also, I think, scared to stay connected, to surrender, to follow directions, to, to give up constructing my life as I thought it should be. After going through the steps, I prayed for a sponsee. A guy walked into my life. If I am the day, he is the night. And he's sober. He will be 4 years sober very soon. Oh, he will be. Most likely will be. And what did I do with him? I took him through the steps, like I was taken through the steps, line by line, do the work, and enter into the world of the spirit and live there. And so I did that. I returned again to Europe and I started drifting again. I drank again lots of coffee, walked a lot, had sponsors that later told me I abused you because I just took you for walks so that I don't need to do my own work. And the truth is, it was nice and easy. Well, that ended up with a stay in a psych ward. That ended up with breaking up relationships. That ended up being with women that are 25 years than I am. That ended up with manic business decisions that cost a fortune. And eventually I ended up again in an institution for about 7 months. And my mind became more and more frantic. But the interesting thing is, I always remembered that first moment of connection, that moment of separation from alcohol, that moment that I tried to drink and I deliberately walked to a bar and I couldn't enter. So a faith, there was a faith and a hope that eventually I would escape this. But the actions I took were all driven by fear, self-delusion, self-pity, dishonesty, and I would say by misguidance in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know it sounds strong, but I want to say it like this. The big book says that we work shoulder to shoulder and we read from the instructions and do them. That's something else than saying to somebody, sit on your hands until your ass falls off and then you don't need to drink. Or keep coming back. Meeting makers make it. That's not my experience. My experience is that eventually I came to Turkey with a large portfolio of insane stories. And I started to do what was recommended to me about 3.5 years earlier. Meaning, live in one place, go to bed early, wake up early, pray, meditate, do the work that the book requires from us, be active in the fellowship, be honest with a sponsor, know his sponsor, and I started doing that. And then the COVID came, so the ability to travel the world with this mania was taken from me, and I took it as an opportunity. And as I kept praying and searching, my sponsor introduced me to two-way prayer. And I started doing it. And then I realized that the connection was made, the corrections I tried to do with making amends and so forth were not really working. Why? Because I was not taking directions. And I was seeking directions from human beings, from a sponsor, from a lawyer, from an advisor, from a friend, whatever. But I was not in a practice to ask God for guidance and do it. So I started doing two-way prayer, and my mind calmed down, and my actions became less erratic. And I don't want to say that I'm perfect, not at all. I mean, there are days that I'm really out of balance. But those days are much less than it used to be. The attacks are much softer, I would say, and the way out is easier. So, in my experience, the practice of two-way prayer, the practice of seeking guidance by putting my fears on paper, putting my self-delusions on paper, by putting my self-pity on paper, by putting my defects of character that are active on paper, and to be honest about them, and to ask for guidance to correct and to do the next right thing in the day ahead. This has transformed me from, I would say, from a headless chicken to a man that can honestly say that he's on the path of being a sober man. And this is my message. The step 1, 2, 3 is about connection, and you can take them pretty quickly. And 4 to 9 is about correction, putting all that stuff to paper, sharing it with another man, sharing it with God, and go out there, make amends, be part of the chain reaction of forgiveness. Be one of those dominoes that lives in a way that is forgiving. And then, as part of that amends, I would say, be open to be directable. And that's where I entered, like the book says, in the fourth dimension, in a new world. And my role is to grow in effectiveness and understanding. And how do I do that? Well, I pray, I write it down, and I do it. And before doing it, I share the guidance with another man and discern what is ego and what is inspiration, let me say. And this has been the way to recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. This has been the way to recover from what medical doctors would call a bipolar disorder, rapid cycling. This has been a way to be without psychiatric medication. This has been a way to accept the COVID as it is. This has been a way to commit in a relationship. This has been a way to be active in the fellowship, sponsor people. And I think this is the way that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was designed. You study the history, this is what you can find. And anything short of that, anything short of an active life of prayer and meditation and actually doing the guidance is a life of a dry drunk, and it's horrible. It brought me multiple times to try to commit suicide or suicide ideation, whatever they call it, but it's pretty dark, and it's unnecessary, really. And there is a beautiful program out there that starts with a connection that is a gift. I think our book describes it somewhere. And I was given this gift by a guy called RC on the back of a taxi. And then I did the work for the correction. And then it took a little while to find out how to be directed. And the interesting thing is, by being directed by God, I don't really question the authority. And in the past, I questioned authority, and I could also not accept misguided authority or seeming authority that we see around the fellowships. And I frantically looked for solutions in Sexaholics Anonymous, in Under-Earnings Anonymous, in Narcotics Anonymous, and I started fellowship shopping. And it didn't work because I was just not practicing 10, 11, and 12. And I did not understand what it means to be beyond human aid and how easy it is to actually surrender and practice a God-guided life. And so for anyone listening out there, if you feel trapped in the bedevilments of page 52, look at the two-way prayer as one of the options to get out of it. Thank you for letting me share.
Awesome, Robert. Thank you so much. Man, your story, I can definitely see God's hand guiding you in so many places through all of those things. What a beautiful thing. Before we get to the question and answer section here, Robert, I'd like you to take just a minute and share a little bit about the fellowship that you regularly participate in, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, I'm an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That means that I live by the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I go to meetings there called Alcoholics Anonymous. I have the privilege to work with a man that is an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and his sponsor is an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we participate in what we call pockets of enthusiasm. What I mean with that is people that are taking the guidance of the book. Don't go all frantic about it, but take it serious and do the work one man with another. So this is one aspect. Then secondly, I go to face-to-face meetings, which is for me to go and return from a meeting. The fastest I can do is a 5 hours journey, because I live on an island and I have to go to the city and come back, and it's a long thing. So I go once a week. I devote my Fridays basically to Alcoholics Anonymous. I take the ferry boat in the morning. I meet my sponsor. We walk around town. We talk, have a meeting. We have lunch. Sometimes I meet the sponsee and I go home. And when I come home, I talk to a guy in Austin, Texas. We went through the steps together and we continue to talk. Then I talk to Father Bill to share my prayers. And that's the Friday. And if I have time, will go to at least one face-to-face meeting. In addition to this, I'm regularly on Zoom meetings. I actively participate in various two-way prayer groups. I sponsor men. When my sponsor asks me to do something for Alcoholics Anonymous, I typically do it. I will not say always, but typically yes. So yeah, I'm active. And what I find is that the people that I have sponsored and who stay active too, they recover. And my first sponsee was also diagnosed with all kinds of other ailments, but he's having a full life today. So I don't know really that there is anything out there that cannot be cured or at least mitigated through this program. And I find a lot of wisdom in the fellowship. I find that there is no problem that has not been resolved by one of our active members. I read the literature. I'm not so much listening to speaker tapes and all that. I really devote my time to having an experience, like we say, having had the spiritual experience. So I'm going for that, and I'm not discounting it. I'm just sharing my experience that I'm not really listening much to speaker tapes. I'm more participating in prayer, meditation, speaking honestly with other men, and helping people. And yeah, I have AA friends from all over the world, and it's great.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And we appreciate you being part of this speaker meeting, doing a speaker tape. Good stuff. All right. So several questions have come in, and I'll go ahead and read them one at a time, let you address each one individually. The first one is from Antonella. She says, how do you get guided to work with sponsees in your recovery? How does that connection happen?
Well, my experience is I have had about 15, and every time I try to work with them, it fails. And every time I am open and I intuitively know it's supposed to happen, and I just offer to read the big book with them, it works. So it's pretty simple. When I when I make myself available and stick to what the book says, at least for the first round of the steps, it works.
Thank you very much, Robert. Next question that came in is from Thomas. Thomas asks, in the hurricane of your addiction, who were the victims you damaged the most? Also, I'm interested in what restitution you felt necessary for your victims. Will you please tell us a bit about what steps 8 and 9 looked like for you?
Okay, the victims include, well, there are hundreds, but let me say that the obvious ones. So father, mother, brother, ex-wife, children, current partner, other women. There is another big one, which for it relates to my profession, being a tax lawyer and being gifted. The problem is when you're totally self-centered, some of these mental constructs deprive authorities from collecting taxes. So there is a big thing there that has required a lot of work, and I've got some guidance, and to make amends for that is not that easy. Then monetary amends for stealing, damaging stuff. One amend I can share is I calculated all the monetary harms I've caused, and this amount was donated to purchase a piece of land to make a healing center for the Bosnian War. With my parents, I made amends. I would say at a quite high level. I owned up to my dishonesty and how I have been a burden to them. And the next morning, my dad came to I was living with them, and my dad came to me and he said, so now we are on a new footing. And I said, yes. And we went for a cycling tour. He wanted to cycle with me, although he was having epileptic seizures. And it's the first time in my life that I enjoyed cycling with him, because since I was young, I disliked it for whatever insane reason. With my brother, I made amends to him and I started helping him on his business. And last night he got awarded a big contract, let's say. And I was with him there last night. It was on Zoom, some government body decided, and I know how I have helped him with my talents as a lawyer. To my children, I have tried to make amends in person, which was not possible, so I wrote letters. The first one's clumsy without guidance, and the second one I prepared with a man that had many years of sobriety. And they were acknowledged, and from the replies, I can see that at least some part of their heart was touched. Same with my ex-wife. I would say there is one woman that is actually the only one I ever loved, and I pushed away dramatically. I'm living with her today in Istanbul. And we have been in the same space now for 12 months, continuously, day in, day out. And I think we're having a good time. Not easy every day, I cannot say that. Sometimes my insanity makes it hard on her. But we're doing our work, and it's working out. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Robert. Those are some great all sorts of different angles at amends, covering all the different ways that it can happen. And man, what's some great, those are some great examples.
I want to say another amend.
Okay.
It's like, in Holland, we used to have those mobile supermarkets that drive through the neighborhood. And I used to steal the bottles from the back, which has this money, when you return them, you get money. So I would steal them, return them, and then buy candy. And then the guy would go around the block and we would do it again. So I went there to his house and I paid him, 50 euros or something. I calculated it. He wasn't at home, but his daughter was there. And she says, oh, my dad would be very glad because after many years, he had to really put a lock and a gate and doors and a lock on that thing because there was too much stealing going on. And then I thought, so this man is working hard and now he needs to lock it and unlock it. And it's just unnecessary work, but necessary apparently. And I'm glad I made that amend. It sounded so trivial, but the relief was tremendous.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. All right, got another question here. This one's from Ryan. Ryan says, Robert, thank you for sharing your experience. Can you talk briefly a bit more about that change you made from trying to figure things out on your own to finally being willing to really connect with God by asking for and following his guidance on a daily basis? What helped you make that change?
Desperation. I had no other options. I mean, I had been institutionalized. I have been institutionalized in the U.S. Then I went to Mexico. I went to do some alternative treatment. I still don't know what they put in my body. So I did all these things, and I wasn't getting better. And I was reluctant to go back to the fellowship here in Istanbul. I was reluctant to the guy that's currently sponsoring me because I was sitting on pride. And eventually, when I called him and we start doing the steps and I start feel relief and I encountered two-way prayer and I couldn't move because of the COVID, gradually it occurred to me that I have no other way. And as that occurs to me, I start practicing more. And I start to cut out all kinds of other things. So I was doing other spiritual practices that by themselves work for large amounts of people. The thing is, for me, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works. It doesn't mean the other things cannot work, but for me, accepting that this is the path and sticking to it and really doing it and not having a nice talk made all the difference.
Thank you. So for those in the live audience and those in the listening audience who may not be familiar with or may not be practicing two-way prayer, and we've had Father Bill W. on as a previous speaker, so those who have listened to all these are familiar with it, but I'd like you to define a little bit what two-way prayer means to you and how it works for you, how you go about doing it.
Yeah, so what I understand is this, that two-way prayer, Bill was asked what is the place of two-way prayer in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous? And his answer is step 6 and 7. And it's my experience that I can come out of step 5 with a list of defects of character, but I have no power over my sloth. I have no power over my greed. I have no power over my lust. So two-way prayer, one thing that I'm doing is I say, God, today I was lustful. God, today I am greedy. God, today I'm fantasizing. God, today I'm angry. So I come with an honest question to God. And I said, please relieve me of this anger. And then I wait, and then I start writing an answer, which comes to me, through me. It comes to me. It comes to paper, let me say. And I write it out literally. And then I look at that guidance with the application of the 4 absolutes. In other words, the guidance that is on paper, is it absolutely honest, pure, unselfish, and loving? So for example, if the guidance would say, go about this business deal and try to screw this guy and be very harsh, this can never be a God-guided sentence. And if the guidance is be honest about your needs, be open to listen carefully, strike a deal that's good for everyone, and be kind in your voice when you speak, don't be arrogant, this guidance I can accept. And my experience is when I do that, so when I go, for example, into a negotiation with this kind of guidance, things turn out very well. Now, so the process is get calm, ask honest question, put the question to paper, wait, observe the pen writing an answer, and then discern the answer using the four absolutes. So absolute honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love in thought and action. And then once it's clear that guidance is meeting all those four criteria, do it. So for example, one day, the guidance says, Robert, don't look on your phone when you take the ferry boat to the mainland, or watch for the dolphins. So I'm sitting in this boat, angry that I cannot read the paper, and there are no dolphins. And then in the horizon, there are some little waves. And the first thing I do is to look, where is the boat that created the waves? And my girlfriend says, hey, those are dolphins. And I go in my mind, are you crazy? These cannot be dolphins. And guess what they were? So in the practice of being mindful, I became aware of the power of this negative self-talk. So, and how did I become aware? Because I did not look at my iPhone. I was on the watch for dolphins, and through that, I became aware of this negativity and how powerful it is. So, these are concrete examples of how two-way prayer works for me. So, ask an honest question, listen, write the answer, discern it with the four absolutes, and do it. And if it's a big thing, of course, talk to someone else before you do it.
Oh, I love that. And I've heard steps 10 through 12 defined this way. Step 10 is I watch. I watch for what I need to observe about myself, a character weakness like you're talking about. Step 11 is I pray, and I listen for what God's will is and the courage and power to carry it out. And step 12 is I go and do it. That's a beautiful way of working steps, our maintenance steps, as they're often called, 10 through 12.
Yeah, and I think this maintenance steps is not right, because if I look back on my first 5 years, without being clear what is step 10, 11, and 12 about, I remained this headless chicken. I remained this manic depressive guy that wasted so much time and money and caused so much damage to all kinds of people. And I remember the first guy that ever sponsored me, I asked him, what is 10, 11? He says, well, read the little prayer book at night and then just go to sleep. And I thought, that's great. Easiest, softer way. I don't need to do anything. And intuitively, I knew it's wrong, but I chose for a few years to live that way, and it didn't work out that well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We've got another question from Ryan that came in. Ryan asks, what is the greatest blessing you've experienced as a result of your recovery and connection with God? To what extent have you seen the 12 promises or other blessings come to fruition in your life?
Well, the greatest blessing of all is to be struck sober on the backseat of a taxi without wanting it, without even honestly going for it. And all the other blessings, I cannot answer it in a hierarchy. I don't know what is the most important one, or what. I don't remember the question, but I don't know hierarchy. There are so many. And the truth is that more often than I want to admit, I have a hard time admitting that there are so many blessings. So the one that I remember often is the backseat of this taxi.
And that's a beautiful thing. You know, I wonder, have you talked to that taxi driver about that experience since then and asked him what his thoughts or maybe his prayer that morning was as he went into that day?
We met 2 or 3 times afterwards. I never asked him about his experience. But what I do know is when I returned to the US, I couldn't walk. I had some problem with my leg. And he was there with a wheelchair, and we went, and I said, let's go to a meeting. So we drove around and drove around and drove around. And then in the end, we ended up in Brentwood in LA, where Richard S. was speaking. And it was a very, very good share. And I will never forget that. So, I mean, we had this bond. And recently I learned that he was asking to a common friend about me, and he's on my mind. I should reach out to him after this talk, actually.
Yeah, that's really neat. My guess, and I'm just trying to put myself in his shoes as I strive to work, my steps, 10, 11, and 12, my direction steps, is that he probably just said, make me an instrument in your hands today, lead me to whatever needs to be done. And he didn't think a whole lot about it other than, I'm sharing my experience, strength, and hope with this guy in the backseat of my taxi. But for you, it was a life altering experience. What a beautiful thing that you and I and others who have and are walking this path have to work as an instrument in God's hands to help others. Are there, and I don't want to say, hey, toot your own horn, brag about yourself, but are there experiences where you have shared your experience, strength, and hope with somebody else that they have said, wow, that really changed my life?
Yes, I have made amends to. I have made amends to. I want to be very careful how I say it. Okay, I have made amends to a man, and so I call him up and I say, "Listen, I want to talk to you." And he says, "What is it about?" I said, "Well, in this and this situation, and that situation, in such and such situation, over the last 7, 8 years, I've been pretty drunk, and I want to make amends for that." And he says, "How so?" I said, "Well, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this is what we need to do to stay sober." And he says to me, "You could not have called at a better moment in my life. I just returned from holiday. It was a wine tasting holiday, and my esophagus is burning from alcohol. When do we meet?" So we met 2 days later. I traveled a couple of 100 kilometers to meet him. I took a big book, and it was the first meeting we ever had. He was on time. He acted like a little boy, full of hope. And we sat in a terrace outside. Um, he tried to hide because he's kind of a well-known guy, and I think I ruined his alcohol. He can't drink as he used to. That's for sure. And so this is one that is that's pretty profound, and there are many more like that.
What a beautiful
I was
story.
talking to Father Bill earlier today, and my book says that at the right time and place, we share with all our friends why alcohol disagrees with us, something like this. And I have realized that the people that I want to be, that I feel called to be close to in every aspect of my life, including work, eventually I will tell them that I'm a recovered alcoholic. And this is so relieving. And a few days ago, a business partner shared with me that he's engaged with a man that he feels not very comfortable, blah, blah, blah. And I say, why? And it turned out that this other partner is just, is most probably an alcoholic. So this guy just wanted from me to hear confirmation that his gut feel could be right. And I said yes, and then I shared with him the solution. So I have come to the conclusion that if I am not open and willing to share that I'm a recovered alcoholic, how can I be one of those dominoes in the chain of forgiveness? It's impossible. So that's how I live.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. If there are any other questions from our live audience, please type that in the Q&A. I'm going to ask one more question, and we might have time for one more after that if we get another one in before we close up. So, Robert, my final question to you is, it sounds like your rock bottom came while you were sober. You weren't drinking. How can you, how does that offer hope to others who are just miserable in sobriety? And maybe this is the question, what is the difference between sobriety and recovery? And how does that change the way you behave in your recovery process?
Yeah, certainly it's true that while I was abstinent from alcohol, I was going increasingly insane. And I started to look for medical diagnoses to be relieved of that insanity. And what I've come to understand is that, yes, there may be a trait in me of manic depressive. And actually, the big book describes the manic depressive. So I call it the alcoholic of the complicated variety, not the plain vanilla one. But the solution is always the same, because alcoholism, bipolar, obsessive compulsive, it's all part of the ism. And so the difference between being abstinent and being recovered is to accept that even alcoholism and mental illness is a defect of character. This is the first point. And the second point, to the best of my ability, try to surrender before I seek outside solutions. So I talked to a famous Dutch psychiatrist professor who is having a clinic for schizophrenic patients, and they are cured through the spiritual approach. And he is overseeing that. So I don't suppose that there are no medications in that place, but I am sure that God comes as the first remedy. So the difference between being abstinent or I am a recovering alcoholic, forever recovering, or being a recovered alcoholic is the acceptance that with God's help, I can be a sane man, meaning I live from inspiration rather than I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, and self-pity. Because if you read the book very carefully, it says that I am driven by fear, and eventually I am driven by this power, some call love, and this thing has direction. So I go from driven by ego to driven by God. This is the thing. And can I do that in all of my aspects of my life in one shot? No. I mean, some doctor tells me don't eat sugar. I do it for 2.5 months. I break it a little bit, and it's now like 2 months ago, and I cannot completely return to the prescribed diet. Do I know it's not good for me? Do I know that I'm playing with diabetes? Yes. Can I stop it on my own? No. Am I willing to bring it to two-way prayer and pray? And is it improving gradually? Yes. Does it feel like a curse? Yes and no. And I think these are aspects of being recovered. Because if I start hiding myself from sugar, that is the same as I'm hiding myself from alcohol. That's the same as I'm hiding myself from women. That's the same as I'm hiding myself from pornography. I mean, it doesn't matter. But I cannot hide, right? Like the book says, that one day the Eskimo will come with a bottle of whiskey. So I think recovered means the honestly saying that without God's help, I have no chance. And with his help, I have all chances of the world. And I don't need to really talk much more about it.
Beautiful. I think that's a great words of wisdom to close off with here. Thanks again, Robert. Thanks again, everybody, for being here, and for all of our listeners who are will be listening to this amazing RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If you have other questions, or if you would like to associate with other people in the RICO 12 audience, please go to rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions, have conversations, and answer others' questions that will come up. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you have not yet gone to www.rico12.com and submitted your email address to get on the invitation list, please go do that so you can join us live each Friday at 12 o'clock noon Central Time. Robert, you've asked to close us off and send us off into our day with the Lord's Prayer read in Dutch. If you wouldn't mind doing that now, that would be great. Thank you.
I will do that. Onze Vader die in de hemel zijt. Uw koninkrijk komen, uw wil geschieden, op aarde als in de hemel. Geef ons heden ons dagelijks brood en vergeef ons onze schulden, gelijk wij ook onze schuldenaren vergeven. En leid ons niet in verzoening, maar verlos ons van de boze. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everybody.
Remember that it works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it. Have a great week.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine.